Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back. My guest today is Dr. Thomas Ritter. I am thrilled to have you, Thomas. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, you are what I would consider a dying breed. Well studied, well educated as a teacher, and
Mm.
I think we're losing those. So that's what part of why I wanted to talk to you about your educational experiences and what you went through in the industry to know what you know today.
Mhm.
So would you be willing to talk to us a little bit about your
Sure.
education?
Sure. Yeah. God, I did everything the hard way in a way, right? I started when I was 13 by taking writing lessons in one of those typical writing schools, where a bunch of kids were riding single file on lesson horses, and all the horses had to wear side reins or standing martingales. It was just the way it was, right? And the lessons were taught by apprentices that were teenagers, essentially, 18, 19 years old, or young Bereiter, they had just graduated, and they were in their early 20s. So in other words, they didn't really know much themselves either. And so there was a lot of yelling and a lot of shaming and putting down of students and so on. So I didn't really learn a whole lot from these people, but I was lucky that I came across some Neindorf students who were in that inner circle of writers who were in the performances that he put on twice a year. And they were like the first teachers who were actually teaching what I had already been reading a little bit in the literature. And back then there was not a lot of literature available, in Germany. It was a small market, but there were just some of the older books, in the late 1970s and early 80s. There was Steinbrecht and Seunig and Podhajski. I mean, they're good books, of course, but now you have a million books. Everybody writes books, right? But and back then it was like 5 or 10 books that were easily available, right? And a lot of the old masters' books were out of print. They weren't, you know, available so easily anymore. So. But yeah, these teachers actually taught what I had read, yeah, in some of the literature. So that was an eye opener, and I mean, they were really good writers, so they were very impressive to me at the time, compared to everything else I was seeing around me. So I was like, oh wow, I want to write like this when I grow up, you know. So they were very inspiring, and then they took me, to Neindorf, so I spent some summer vacations at Neindorf's barn. And went to the university, and that was my focus. I never wanted to be a professional trainer. I thought that's, dealing with all these people, it's way too hard. And I saw how my teachers were struggling. It's like, oh no, I just want to write. So, but I spent some time in the US at UCLA. I had a scholarship from the German government to finish my PhD thesis, and there I met Shanna, and then I got bored with academia in a way. I felt like, okay, I've got my PhD, I've done what I came to do. I've proven that I'm smart enough to do it. And then I sort of lost interest a little bit in that, but I wanted to write more. And when I met Shanna, I saw my chance. It's like I wouldn't be able to do this on my own, but with another person, we might be able to pull this off. And so we moved to Eugene, Oregon, and rented a barn aisle, in a barn that was managed by Morgan trainers, and so
Okay.
then did a whole typical lessons and training and that sort of thing. And while we were there, we met Carl Mikolka from the Spanish Writing School, and he completely overhauled our education, and taught us a whole different way of looking at things and a much more sophisticated system in a sense that was a little bit more academic in a sense where you had lots of moving parts that interacted with each other following certain principles. And so for every problem, you could find a solution that way, right? When you can figure out what's the root cause of this, then you know which moving parts are involved and how do they interact with each other. So you could always find a way to um, yeah, so to solve the problem that you were running into. So and that's became the foundation of what we've been teaching and what we've been doing since then.
Hmm. Yeah,
And then
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the problem solving part is so interesting because when
Mhm.
people think of dressage, they often think of very systematic one, two, three. And if the horse doesn't do it right, they just get cast out. And
Mhm.
so people that really understand the progression understand problem solving very well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's not mechanical, right? It's not like a cooking recipe where you take this ingredient and this ingredient and in the same amount, and then eventually you get the finished dish. Or it's not like a an owner's manual of a car. You know, you push this button, you press this pedal, and then all cars basically function the same way, right? So it's not like that. And sometimes you run across students who kind of want that, you know, they're asking you questions, basically, you know, give me a manual, you know, like my car has a manual or my coffee maker has a manual, so where I know which button to push, and then every time I push the button, I get the same result. And of course, horses are not like that, right? Even if you push the same button twice, you may get very different results depending on the
right.
situation and the circumstances and so on. So yeah, you have to have an understanding of the horse's mind and the horse's body and the, you know, whole biomechanics and everything else. So you can work with nature and with physics and with the horse psychology and instead of working against it, you know.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's such a rare skill. I think more and more a very rare skill to be able to understand a system of
Mhm.
principles and progression,
Mhm.
but be able to cater to the 1% deviation.
Yeah.
Not many people can do both.
Exactly. You know, a lot of the really good riders are purely intuitive riders. Like my earlier teachers, they were very good. They had great feel, and as a result, they couldn't explain very well why do you do this now, and you know what do you do, how do you do it, why do you do it, you know, all these things that I wanted to know because I didn't have much talent when I was young. It was really hard for me to figure this all out, you know. So that's why I read so much and I tried to find clues in all the books and
Hmm.
uh, was hoping that I could, you know, understand like when do you apply certain aids? When can the horse respond properly to the aid, you know, so that you're working with the movement and not against the movement and that sort of thing. And so that was a long process. Took a long time, and Mikolka really helped with that with his. He added stuff that I couldn't find in the book, so that my old teachers hadn't been able to teach me. So then you could mm, I could teach myself how to feel based on the engineering knowledge, so to speak. You know, when once I understood how this works in principle or how it works in theory, then I had an idea of what to pay attention to and what to look for. And there were moments, you know, when all of a sudden I had this light bulb moments like, oh, that is what I'm supposed to feel. That's what I'm supposed to look for or pay attention to. Nobody ever told me that, right? It's been there all along. I just didn't know that this was important, right? So
Hmm.
part of feeling like, you know, I'm insensitive, I have no feel, I have no talent was that nobody had been able to tell me what to watch out for, what to pay attention to, you know. Because if they had done that, I could have learned a lot faster, probably, right? So,
Yeah, I think probably a lot of students can relate to that, that they think that they have poor feel or no feel and they're
right,
looking for a recipe
right, exactly.
of what to do.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
what do you do if you have a student like that that is what they would consider insensitive or having poor feel? How do you teach somebody like that to develop feel?
That's a good question. When I was young, everybody was always saying, "Well, you're either born with feel or you can never learn it," right? But it's not true. You can learn feel, but you have to know some of the theory and you have to know what to look for. So, I mean, with students, I often have them. modify their seat, or I tell them to like focus for a moment on like the pendulum swinging of the rib cage of the horse. Like at the walk, you feel that pretty well, right? It goes back and forth, and just feel it and see if you can follow that a little bit. And now try to make that movement a little bigger, maybe like when you're on a circle or whatever, and the rib cage swings to the outside, then um, see what happens if you not just if you don't follow passively, which is what a lot of people do. They just sit there, even if they're relaxed. But because of gravity and mass inertia, sitting passively can already diminish the horse's movement, right? Because then your weight has a certain resistance, or for the horse that the horse has to work against, and that can make the gates smaller, or it can diminish the movement. So if you join the movement and then you increase it a little bit and watch what happens, right? Then I want them to try something, and then I say, okay, how does that feel? How does the horse respond to that? Is he better now? Is he worse? Or is he the same?
Hmm.
And if he's better or worse, in what way? And it's amazing how often people cannot describe what they're feeling. Well, I would do the same thing, with exercises in lessons. I'd have them ride an exercise and then maybe have them trot around afterwards, just basic, simple whole school or circle, so that both the horse and the rider can feel any changes in the body, any changes to the balance or the quality of the gait. And so then I would always ask the student, so what are you feeling? Is it better, worse, same, right? And then when they answer, sometimes they would say weird, or
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, good weird or bad weird, because it could be either, right? And then I would ask them to put it into words, exactly in what way is it better, and then by having to describe it to me, they were forced basically to really think about what did I feel, what really happened, where did I feel it, how did the horse change, and then that gets the brain working in a certain direction in a way, right? It gets people, for one thing, paying attention to things that are important, and then it gets them, uh, you know, registering and recording in their mind what's happening in the horse's body, right? And then, of course, I have them write exercises, and I point out to them if the horse leaves the line of travel. Like, you see, now you're drifting out, you're drifting in. Did you notice that? Or the haunches just stepped out or in, or the shoulders, or maybe the whole horse, and so on. So just giving them that feedback like a mirror, here the horse did that. Did you feel that? And things like that. Or um, would tell them, you know, focus on the up and down movement of the horse's back, and now, you know, for two strides when the back comes up, lighten yourself a little bit. Instead of just sitting on your seat bones, support yourself a little bit more with the insides of your knees, but without gripping, just rest on them, right? And take that momentum of the horse's back movement like you're surfing a wave, and then increase the upswing a little bit, just so that you feel like there's a little space between your seat bones and the saddle. And your breeches can still be in touch, but the seat bones feel like they're losing touch for a moment, and then join again, and then sit neutral for a couple of strides, and then maybe for a couple of strides emphasize the downswing and put more weight on the pelvic floor or so, right? So that by swinging up, you can make room for the horse's back to lift, and the hind leg that's in the air can lift higher or can travel farther just because you're getting out of the way, in a sense. And if you emphasize the belly of that back motion, then your weight presses the grounded hind leg into the ground a little bit more, into the footing, right? So by sometimes swinging up and sometimes pressing down and sometimes being neutral, you can create more elastic gaits, right? You create more flexion and extension in the hind leg joints instead of just sitting there like a brick. A lot of people are just rigid, right? Or they feel like I have to sit correctly, because traditional dressage instruction was often somewhat rigid in that sense, emulating a form rather than following the motion and shaping the motion with your body.
Yeah, but to be able to ride around and I mean, there's so many pieces involved in being able to feel what's happening and assess what you need to do to respond to get the desired result, such as when do you sit heavier, when do you sit lighter, and how can you differentiate within split seconds in a couple strides apart. Um, you would have to have feel because you can't hear instruction fast enough to respond to that level of change. So you have to have a good teacher, I'm sure, but you have to develop feel to be able to write.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's a long road. It takes a long time. If
Yeah.
somebody is not born with great talent, then it takes a long time to develop that feel. But it can be done. And in lessons, I would often just like when I see that the rider is a little kind of immobile, a little stiff, and the horse's back is a little tight and dropped, then I would do these things, and I would tell the rider, okay, now when the inside hind leg lifts up, or when the inside shoulder comes back, so they can look, then swing up like now, and then cruise for a moment, and now when that inside hind leg is on the ground, for example, then swing down and sink a little bit deeper. Like now would tell them now, and then maybe do the same for the outside hind leg. When the outside hind leg is in the air, swing up now, and then when it's on the ground, now sink down and emphasize the downward motion now. So basically try to get them to pay attention to the upward swing of the back and then the downward swing, and always like just two strides in a row. And then did anything happen? Did something change? And now if you do this for the inside hind leg and the outside hind leg, was there a difference? Did the horse respond with each hind leg, or maybe just with one? Because it could be that this only works for the one hind leg because for whatever reason that hind leg needs a little bit more room to move and the other one maybe not so much, right? So and then now do this in the other direction, right? And see if you get the same result going in the other direction, because it can be different too. And
Hmm.
then teaching the students little games, little experiments they can do, and to just watch, pay attention, feel, and register what happens. Gives them, in a way, little tools to play with, and things they can do on their own. And you can do this on a 20-meter circle, very simple, walk, trot, whatever, nothing complicated. It's actually good if you keep things really simple when you're playing with the seat and with shaping the movement. But then, of course, you could do the same thing in a half pass, right? Or you can do similar things in the canter. But canter movement is a little different, so there I do slightly different things with a student. But then you can also emphasize the lifting of the forehand, or you can emphasize flexion of the hind legs, inside hind especially. And so then the canter stride can go from flat and scratchy and into the ground to round and more uphill and more like a big beach ball that's bouncing along and things like that.
Well, all of
Yeah,
those things are challenging in their own to work on for a rider.
they are.
But if you have a rider who has a really logical and kind of rigid mentality where they want step one, two, three, and I want you to just tell me what to do, and I can't feel, and they're sort of a rigid thinker or more logical in their approach. Do you ever feel like some people need to change their whole personality to get better at riding?
Yeah, I mean, some people are tough to teach when they're so rigid,
Yeah.
so like total engineering mind or computer
Exactly.
programmer mind,
Yeah.
that can be difficult. And then yeah, you just have to remind them it's a living being, it's not a computer. And
Yeah.
I come from anthropological science essentially, right? And there are no real hard and fast rules.
Yeah.
In the humanities there, when we talk about rules, then they apply maybe in 70% of the cases. But
Yeah.
there's always this 30% or 40 or 20% where something else happens because it's a complex system. There
Hmm.
are many variables at play, and we all always see only a small percentage of the variables. So
Hmm.
if we follow the rules and something different happens, then maybe there are other variables at play that we're not seeing yet. Or
Yeah.
one of my old professors used to say there are no exceptions, like in language, for example, there are only competing rules that interfere with each other at certain
Okay.
points. Like you operate, on the basis of rule number one, and then you expect an outcome, and then, oh, look, that's not what the language does. That's some, that word has a different plural than what I expected, or, whatever. And but so there is another rule, over there that interferes with this. And with the writing, it's the same thing. I always feel like when you have your theoretical structure in your mind and you operate based on this knowledge that you have and this framework, and the horse doesn't play by the rules, or the horse obviously hasn't read the book, right? So it's like, hey, why is he doing that? He's not supposed to do that. Doesn't
Wow.
he know that? Then it's okay, there must be something else going on, right? So I'm not seeing the whole picture. And then, and I always explain that to the students too. It's like always, it's try to explain to them, well, I'm seeing this, let's try this and let's see what happens, right? And then even if it doesn't solve the problem, or if the horse gets worse, then we can address that and say, okay, this didn't work. Why is that? What are we not seeing? What else could be the reason? Because it's like, in medicine, right? You see symptoms, you make a diagnosis, then you prescribe a therapy. And if your diagnosis is correct, the therapy works, right? Patient gets better. If the patient doesn't get better, then the diagnosis was wrong. So obviously we identified the wrong root cause of the problem. So go back to the drawing board. What else could it be?
Mhm.
So and I make that transparent to the students so that they can do it themselves. Like that's always my goal, that eventually they don't need me anymore. They understand how the process works. And there's a bit of a scientific side to writing as well, right? Especially troubleshooting.
Mhm.
And so if you apply this logical thinking, and you observe, and then you maybe try something like test, write an exercise, not because you want to make a miracle, but because you feel like I'm lacking information. I don't have all the pieces to the puzzle. I don't know why the horse is doing this. Let me try this and see what he does, and let me try this and see how he responds to that. And once I have enough data and I can see patterns, I'm always looking for patterns, right? In this situation, he does this. In this situation, he does that. And once I see patterns and commonalities, then I can usually figure out what causes that
Yeah.
pattern.
It's such a
So,
balance between theory and just
mhm.
plain art, feel and
Right.
art and
That's
experimentation.
very true.
You can get really lost without one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. You,
Yeah.
you need a healthy combination of both.
Yeah.
And there are people who get completely lost in anatomical details or details of biomechanics, and then it's strictly academic and has nothing to do with the horse that they're sitting on anymore. And then at that stage, I always lose interest. It's like I got interested in biomechanics because I felt like it can help me ride better.
Mhm.
But there comes this point where it's strictly academic for academia's sake, and then it's no longer helping me to ride better, and then I get bored with it really fast. You know. So I want to understand how the body functions, and how the different body parts interact with each other, because that's important. How movement gets transmitted, how physical forces get transmitted through the body, and how the energy flows through the horse's body, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, I need to feel it too, and I'm also interested in feeling what the horse is feeling and thinking. My early teachers were really good at that. They could always tap into what the horses were feeling, what they were thinking, and because they were such intuitive riders, they didn't analyze the academic side so much, but they had a pretty good sense of the horse's thoughts and feelings and so on.
Yeah, it's so interesting because people who tend to get very linear thinking about
Mhm.
biomechanics. Of course, as you're, I'm sure, very aware, there are so many schools of thought in the biomechanical world,
Mhm. Yeah.
and they all have scientific studies to prove
Mhm.
their thing.
Mhm.
And so they, can present you a horse who is biomechanically correct, who looks miserable. And then and then there's the feeling world where it's so open to interpretation, where everybody is making what I would say are opinions based on their opinions of what the horse is
Mhm.
thinking and feeling. And so without the intersection of the two, both of them can be completely useless alone.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
it's such a hard it's such a hard line to walk where you can walk the middle of those two and
Mhm.
get lost in either direction.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then Shanna is complementary to me. She is very intuitive.
Hmm.
She is very talented. And through our conversations of the rides we had and observations we've made, I think I improved my intuition and feel more.
Mm.
And also, she encouraged me in a way to trust my intuition because, for my own background, if there is no evidence to support your intuition, then I was suspicious and said, well, there's no reason why that should be, right? So I go by what I can see and evidence and so on. But over the years, I realized that intuition is always right, even if I have no explanation, even if I have no idea why, it's just if this little voice tells me do this or don't do that, it's always right. And then, I learned to listen to it and follow that intuition. And then afterwards, I would figure out, okay, why did that work?
Mm.
Or if I went against it, I always regretted it. It was always a mistake not to listen to the intuition, right?
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. And then Shanna, of course, writes purely from feel and from intuition. And but then when we talk about it, then we analyze, okay, why, you had that feeling, you did this, horse got better. Why was that? What did you do exactly? And then she had to explain it to me so I could understand it, right? So she became more analytical by talking to me, and I developed my intuitive side more through our conversations and working together. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And having experiences like the Neindorf Institute or Carl McCullough, like um you have a goal in mind. You've seen and felt something that you can aspire
Right.
to, and that's something that I'm very jealous of because those types of experiences don't really exist anymore, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's become very rare. That's very, very true. I mean, when I was at Neindorf's, there were always really, really good riders in the arena. I was there in the 1980s when Melissa Sims was still there.
Yeah.
She was, I mean, she rode like 12 horses a day or so. She was there from early in the morning till late at night. And these people rub off on you. If you're riding around and you have some really, really beautiful, elegant rider riding around, and you absorb something, and you try, not to look too foolish, and not to, yeah. Yeah, often I was the weakest rider in the arena there with, several of these performance riders and stuff. And that was great. I mean,
Yeah.
I learned, I absorbed the images and like, yeah, this is, what I would like to look like so at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, um we don't have experiences like that. I went to the riding school in Spain for 6 weeks, and that
Mm,
was better than anything I could get here, but it's no Neindorf Institute, and there's
mm,
no Neindorfs of the day that have horses for me
mm.
to ride. So
Yeah, unfortunately. So did you go to Jerez in
yeah,
Spain?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was 10 years ago or more. I see how old I am.
Wow.
I was 24, so it was 11 years ago. No,
Mm.
12 years ago. I'm older than I remembered. And it was a good opportunity for me because I had only ever ridden young horses, starting horses.
Mhm.
It was an eye opener for me too, and
Yeah.
was fortunate to experience higher level movements, but I certainly did not belong there, you know.
Well, I mean, it's a great opportunity. I'm glad you got to go, and they're pretty good riders. I mean, they have some really top
Yeah,
trainers.
it was wonderful. I mean, I loved being there, but the capacity to experience that and absorb that
Mm.
is dying or dead in the industry.
Mm.
And I ask everybody I interview, what do
Mm.
you think of us as a solution for, young people coming up to learn the
Mm.
art of riding?
That is hard.
And I don't mean, chasing your horse around with a peacock feather. I mean actually
Mm.
riding, to
Yeah.
like the art that you describe.
Well, that's difficult. They'd have to find teachers. I mean, the teachers from Nindorf school, they let me ride one of their horses after a while, and then I had uh, almost daily lessons with them on that horse. And the horse at the time was trained to third level and plus PF, and then together we learned the tempo changes. Um, so that was I was lucky, you know. I think you have to be in the right place at the right time, meet the right teachers, and find opportunities. Um, the thing is, it's so difficult to find somebody who will be, you know, who's willing to let you ride their well-trained horse because
Hmm.
it takes so many years to make a good horse, and it can be destroyed so easily, so quickly.
Hmm.
And as a, it's not a business model, right? Because you could never charge enough for a lesson to break even. You know, when you have a horse that took, I don't know, 6 years or more to really train to a high level and to be really finely tuned and so on, that is such a huge investment in time and 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 work and energy. Yeah, nobody would be able to pay that much money or be willing to pay that much money. And in the past, the schools they yeah they had well-trained horses. Neindorf had 70 or 80 horses when I was there, you know, different levels, different breeds, from totally young to Grand Prix, you know. And he had um certain horses that he would use only for the lower level riders or the newcomers, and he had certain horses that the better riders were able to ride, and then there were some horses that only his top riders were allowed to ride, like all the Lusitanos and the PREs. They were reserved for the inner circle, so to speak. Um, I don't know how he did that, but he didn't pay much rent for the facility that was owned by the city, and they let him have it for a really low price. But he also lived extremely frugally,
Hmm.
and he told me, you know, one time, you know, some months, you know, a couple of horses get sick, and I have to give or you know had have to give all the money to the vet, and then I live on bread and butter for a month, basically, you know.
Wow.
So. But he was this old Prussian military officer, you know, his whole family was military officers, like 200 years back at least. So he was extremely rigid, well, not rigid, disciplined and
Yeah.
just tough, you know,
Yeah.
and just he did whatever needed to be done to survive and, you know, feed his horses, and it was incredible.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Do you see any future for a writing school again? Do you see that there be any indication that that could come back?
The old school riding school. I in Abu Dhabi they just made one, right?
Oh.
It's a branch of the school in Jerez, I think. I think
Oh,
it's staffed with trainers from Jerez and with horses.
okay.
From there, it's now the fifth school, right? Mm, and they just did an exhibition there in Abu Dhabi, actually, just this last weekend or so. All the five schools, right? Saumur, Vienna, Jerez, and
Yeah.
Lisbon. They were there, and the guys from Abu Dhabi, and we saw them in Jerez. When was that? 2 years ago, maybe, or 3 years ago, when the schools all came together to celebrate some anniversary of the school in Jerez. And that's when I first heard of the school in Abu Dhabi, and I was like, "Huh, what is that?" You know, and who are they? And but they actually brought pretty well, I have to say, and they were working with the trainers from Jerez, and some of them may even have been Spaniards too. I think they were talking to each other in Spanish, and it's basically well, with the oil money they bought that school and they built everything they needed, a facility that's the indoor arena. What I saw in the little video clips, the arena is a bit of a copy of the arena in Jerez, you know,
Okay.
with the short side with the arches and you know the seating area. But that's what it would take, right? You need some billionaire who is willing to just spend the money on trainers and horses and facilities because there's no way, no way you can um, make that profitable. I mean, Spanish riding school in Vienna is really struggling,
Yeah.
make ends meet. And depending on how you start and where you start, um, building a school, I mean, you can either hire a bunch of Grand Prix riders, but then they will be a diverse bunch, probably from different traditions, different backgrounds. So it won't be a homogeneous school, at least not for a long time, right?
Mhm.
And everybody will be doing their own thing, and they may or may not match or get along, or may not be a coherent kind of system then. Or you start with one or two head trainers who then bring along a generation of beginners, and that takes a long time, right? And then also is the issue, what about horses? Are you starting from scratch with all young horses that you have to start so that they're all uh, trained in your tradition and in your methodology, or are you going to buy Grand Prix horses
Mhm.
with all the issues that entails? Usually, when you buy a trained horse, you buy a whole bunch of problems too, you know. Then they were maybe not ridden the way you want to ride, and they have all kinds of, problems that you have to sort out. So it's a monumental task
Yeah.
start from scratch.
That's so
And I mean, yeah, it is unfortunate. It's just super expensive. I mean, in historically, the royal courts or the aristocratic courts had their riding schools, and they had the funds until the Napoleonic Wars, and then they were poor because they spent all their money on wars,
important.
and then a lot of these schools closed, and yeah, and that's when the circus then became basically the new employer of all the trainers who used to work for the aristocrats. Yeah, and so then that was the only place where a civilian high school dressage trainer could still make a living. Yeah, and the military did more the campaign school, so through third level, basically. And they didn't have much use for airs above the ground or piaffe or passage or things like that. Some officers did that as a hobby on the side. They had the military also hired civilian trainers to help train the horses, but it was not the same, not to the same level as in the aristocratic courts in the 18th, 17th century and so on. Um, it's difficult. I mean, I think the people there in Abu Dhabi found a good compromise in by making a deal with Jerez, and I don't know if the trainers from Jerez just go there on loan for a while and then cycle through and go back. I don't know, or most likely I would think they will train competent trainers there in Abu Dhabi so that eventually they don't have to come so often anymore and they can then sustain themselves, but then they can give them this infusion of knowledge and horses so they could sell them some horses that are already fairly well trained in Jerez, and then they could be shipped to Abu Dhabi, and then they continue the training there under the supervision of the guys from Spain. And so that would be a bit of a shortcut there. You could probably build something in, I don't know, 10 years or so.
What
You
kind
know,
of horses are they using there?
PREs, I think.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, as far as I can tell. I mean, they look Baroque, and I would think if they cooperate with Jerez, they
Yeah.
probably get Spanish horses, I would think.
Yeah.
And the Spanish riding school in Vienna had a cooperation with a school in South Africa for a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ignaz Lauscher, I think, used to go there regularly, and maybe Hausberger also. Some of the older Bereiter and Oberbereiter would go and visit and then train the school. I guess they were pretty good as well, and they rode Lipizzans and had uniforms that were similar to the uniforms in Vienna. They were inspired by that. But I don't think they exist anymore.
Okay. I'd never heard of
Uh,
one in South Africa.
yeah, I think they still were still around in the early 2000s, I think, but I'm not sure if they still exist. I think they're not there anymore. Temple Farms, of course, was a pretty good, institution, but Temple Smith was a steel billionaire, and bought this big farm near Chicago and then hired Carl Mikolka and others. And they developed a whole team of riders and a whole group of horses so they could do exhibitions that were similar to the ones in Vienna, basically all the same program points as in Vienna and really high level too. So, but it takes a lot of money. That's the problem.
Is Temple Lipizan still open?
I think so. I think they're still there. I don't know who the head trainer is now, but I think they still have their competitions. They still breed, as
Okay.
far as I know.
So this is an off the wall question, but why don't more dressage aficionados have Lipizans? You never see Lipizans.
Well, they're small, they're white, and they have bad hair, thin hair. I
Okay.
always said that, if they were big and black with lots of hair, everybody
Yeah,
would be riding them. And if Frisians were small and white and bad hair, then nobody would ride Frisians.
that's funny.
It's a little mean, but
Yeah.
I always felt that there was a little, something to that. And
Yeah.
traditionally, the Lipizzaner are not that easy to ride.
Yeah.
They had some conformational issues sometimes. They're also extremely intelligent horses, and they
Yeah.
have a very strong sense of fairness. They can get really ugly if
Yeah.
they feel like you're picking on them and you're not fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I always loved riding them because they're so interesting and they're so deep, and to me, they're always the intellectuals of the horse world and the academics, They're smarter than most riders, for sure.
Well, that
Yeah.
answers my question then.
Yeah, if you get a chance to ride one, they're wonderful. They're really, really good
Yeah,
horse.
I can't say I've ever ridden one,
Uh,
unfortunately. I've ridden a lot of breeds, but I've never met anyone with a well-trained Lipizan.
mm. Yeah. In the US, they were often sold as amateur housewives horses because they're small, they're safe, they're sweet, and so on. The gates are not that big, So then they often ended up with riders who were more or less beginners and who couldn't really do the horses justice, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, for the competition ring, they're too small, they're between 15 and 16 hands usually. They don't have the big, flashy medium trot and extended trot that the warm bloods have. So if you try to compete on a Lipizzaner, you're starting behind, and
Yeah.
it's difficult to get a good score.
I find
Uh,
it so interesting that the dichotomy between the preservation of the best riders and the best horses, the Spanish riding school has been the pinnacle of like what we would
mm,
consider the best of the best,
mm.
wouldn't pass at all in the dressage ring, in the competitive ring.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird, right? I mean, there's so much. There are always fashion trends involved, right? The fads always go this way or that way, and there's always a certain breed of horse or type of horse that is popular, and then if you don't ride that, it already sets you back. And
Mhm.
the competition tests, of course, are written for the big moving warm bloods, so there's lots of extensions in there. But in the Spanish riding school and in Baroque dressage in general, the medium and extended trot didn't really play a role. I mean, if people in the past wanted to go fast, they would gallop.
Right.
And a big trot was maybe used in cart horses, just to cover long distances on roads. But it doesn't really have a great practical application when you're riding, It doesn't really serve a great purpose. I mean, gymnastically, yes, developing pushing power and going forward for a short distance, that's okay. But you don't need to go for miles and miles in the medium trot or something like that,
Have you
usually at
ever
least.
thought about putting together a course on riding history? Because I would love to buy that.
I did something like that. I think we still have that, the old masters, where we did in our membership, we did, oh, it's a few years ago. I would introduce one of the old masters, and a little bit the time period where he lived, and explained a little bit what was special about that master and the whatever, new invention or highlights or what was important, what did he focus on, and I put together then exercises that were either from that book or at least inspired by the
Mhm.
descriptions in the book. If the books didn't have any specific exercises, and I would make something up that uses elements that the author describes, and then so that was a whole year from starting with Pluvinel and then ending with Nuno Oliveira, basically. So
I'd love to look at that. That's cool.
yeah, you can have to talk to Shanna and see, yeah, see how we'll give you access to it. Um, so. It's a bunch of, like lectures on video and then
Yeah.
PDFs with the exercises and explanations, video with the explanations of how to write it and stuff.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by the time, the breed of horse, and the way and the style of riding and how those are all affected by each other. Because so
Hmm.
many people don't understand or think about those
Hmm.
things. So when they try to take a certain breed and ride it in a certain school of riding, and it's not made for that type of horse, or it wasn't made for the type of horse that, we're riding today. Like,
Exactly.
it's very interesting if you don't think about those things and if you don't know those things, and you can get in pretty big trouble
Right.
trying to put
Ex-
a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's interesting, because of all my clinic travels, I had to work with a huge variety of horses and riders and
Yeah.
stuff. And you can always see when you work with a horse what they were bred for, because historically every horse needed to have a job, right?
Mhm.
Or and horses were bred specifically for whatever job people wanted to do. So after, 100 or 200 or 300 years, the qualities that the horse needs to do this specific job, they're really pronounced, and that job is easy for that type of horse. But
Mhm.
then if you try to do a very different kind of job with that horse, you make life really hard for yourself and for the horse.
Yeah.
It's like if you take a Lipizzaner who was bred to be elevated and collected and you want to do Western pleasure with that,
Yeah.
you're not going to be happy, and the horse won't be either. And I heard of a case like that actually when we were still living in
Really
the US. Yeah, and that didn't go well apparently. So
interesting.
I was told about it. I didn't actually meet the person or the horse, but I heard about it. And it's like, oh my God, how can you do that? That is so stupid. Yeah, and the old masters actually, some of the old authors were saying too that part of being a good horseman is also to find the right job for the right horse. And back then, some horses were used for driving. They were maybe not suitable for riding, but they were suitable for driving or pulling a plow or whatever. And some horses were maybe good for the hunt, and others were, good for a parade and, or for a carousel. Those were the big jobs they had, or the military. You know. So and they were saying that if you insist on using the horse for a job that he's just not bred to do or not suitable for, then that's a sign of stupidity and arrogance, basically. That you
Yeah.
think you know better than nature, or you think you can do, something with a horse that he was never meant to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are you on PREs and Lusitanos then in that regard? Because I know some German classicists don't like them for that method of writing.
I've always loved them. They were always my beauty ideal, And when I grew up, there were only warm bloods in Germany, basically. And then some people had some Haflingers and fjord horses, like the people who would just go out on trails. Some people had Arabs, but by and large, there were only warm bloods. And then when I uh, went to Neindorf's barn mid '80s, he had everything. Like he had PREs, he had thoroughbreds, he had Lusitanos, he had Lipizzans,
Mhm.
and for me, the classical ideal were always his students on the Lusitanos and the PREs. I mean, that's just everything is round, everything is beautiful, and it's just that was my aesthetic. And I still love the big, bulky Baroque stallions the most. That's it's just my type of horse. You know. And of course they were not bred for the big medium trot and extended trot, so they had a hard time in the competitions.
Mm.
Um, but the breeding program has changed, right? Of course, the PRE breeders and Lusitano breeders dream of being able to have a horse in the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
So they've even crossed in some warm bloods into their PRE and Lusitano lines. Some of them, they're not supposed to, but some of them, I guess, have done that. So they get a little bit more of them. And you can see that the modern Baroque horses have better trots than they did 30, 40 years ago. Also, the necks are often better. Back, in the 90s or 80s, a lot of the Baroque stallions had somewhat short necks and very fat. They were almost triangular, right, with not very much room in the throat latch area. So it was hard to get them really through and on the bit and so on. That was took a lot of work in a way to make them so supple that they could lift and elevate and still be close to the vertical, right? And of course, in the competition world, you get killed, by the judges if the nose is a little in front of the vertical, or at least they used to. So, but on the other hand, the warm blood breeders or the warm blood riders then realize that um, they have a great extended trot, but they have crappy piafs. The horses can't get their feet off the ground.
Uh-huh.
So they tried to breed a horse that was like the best of both worlds, right? The Piaffe and Passage of the Baroque horses, but then the um, extended trot of the warm bloods. And you can see warm bloods and Baroque horses converge a little bit, in
Yeah.
terms of the gaits. Um, in that process, though, the Baroque horses have become sleeker, narrower, leggier, and I don't like that so much. They can't support the weight as well when they're more shaped like a sport horse.
Yeah.
Mm. And in a way, then you're changing the breed, and it's not to me, it's not a real, PRE or Lusitano anymore. If it looks like a warm blood, then you
Yeah.
might as well buy a Hanoverian one. So,
Yeah. I remember maybe 7 years ago, a client hired me to go help her pick a new horse. We went to
mm,
Ocala and she wanted to look at PREs. And
mm,
all of the PREs, I thought these don't look like PREs. They look like
mm,
warm bloods. And I was trying to figure out what I was looking at until I asked enough questions of the breeder and found out that they were crossed with warm bloods. But they were
right.
they were not the PREs that I knew
Right.
mentally or physically. They weren't very.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it changes things, right? Especially if you cross them, mentally the Baroque horses are a little different from the warm bloods too,
Hmm.
I find. Um, and when a horse gets too leggy and too narrow and too short in the back, then they become very unstable because the center of gravity is very high, the support base is too narrow or too small. And these horses then always have trouble bending and turning or doing lateral movements because it's so hard for them to balance with the rider on top.
Hmm.
Whereas the old Baroque style is sturdy and they're much more balanced in themselves already. So that makes it easier for them to carry the rider, and people keep getting taller, bigger, heavier, So you really need a horse that is sturdy enough to support the modern rider, right? And you
Yeah.
can't have something that's like this wide, and that upright rectangle.
Yeah.
So, because if they lose their balance, they panic, they get scared, they start bucking, so they don't fall down, right? And so they often become very difficult to ride,
Yeah.
not just because of the fear factor of losing balance and not knowing what to do with this rider on top and so on.
So
Mm.
let me ask you one last question, unless you have anything else I don't want to keep you forever. Uh, but what do you think the most important thing for any young rider coming up who wants to be really good? What would your advice be in today's
Ooh.
opportunities to them?
Yeah. Best thing would probably to try and find a barn with uh, good riders who ride in a way that where you can really say, I want to be like that when I grow up, and then maybe Yeah, volunteer to groom horses and help out around the barn and watch and maybe get some lessons so that you kind of weasel your way in that way, you know. But I think there's a lot of value in watching good riders, and there's a lot of value in yeah, being a working student or helping out around the barn. Because yeah, even just doing the barn work, you have to handle horses usually, right? You have to make sure you don't get kicked, make sure you don't scare a horse and that sort of thing. So you already learn to read body language of the horse and um, yeah, and then see if you can convince somebody to give you lessons and So that's probably the best thing you can do, you know, unless your parents are millionaires and they can buy you a good horse and hire the best trainer.
But if your
So,
parents are millionaires, you need to convince them to build that riding school.
right, exactly. That's very true. And a lot of the top competition trainers or riders are from wealthy families. You know, they grew up in a different world where everything was available, where the parents could hire the Olympic rider as the teacher for the little kid and buy good horses and
Mhm.
provide a good facility or board at the facility of some Olympic trainer or whatever they're into. Um, but for the average person, I think that the best way is to look around and see if there's a good rider, where you get a I don't know, good feeling in a sense where the horses are happy, the horses are sound, where it looks harmonious and it looks beautiful and and you may even have to be flexible in the discipline. Yeah? You may want to be a dressage rider, but maybe there's only a crappy dressage rider, but a great Western trainer in your area. Then maybe go with a great Western trainer. You can always switch later, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you can use your Western skills in dressage too, and vice versa, right? So yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to find good teachers.
Mhm.
The funny thing is that, in my clinic travels, didn't matter where I went, everybody told me, oh, there's just no good trainer here. Whether I was in the US or whether I was in Germany or in Austria, I was like everywhere the same. They were saying,
Mhm.
oh, it's just nobody I can ride with here. And no, it, it's not so easy.
It's not. We really, really need good riders coming up.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
they're going to have to go out of their way to figure it out, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, for all this great information. You gave me so much to think about.
Yeah,
And would definitely love to purchase that course on writing history because that's right up my alley.
cool. Yeah, I didn't know that you're interested in history.
Yeah,
That's
I love it. I don't like history. I like horse
uh-huh.
history. The only thing
Uh-huh.
I care about. I never paid attention until they started involving horses and wars and
Hmm.
changed
Right.
breeding
Right.
and riding and
Yeah.
civilization as a whole. That's the only time I got
Uh,
interested, but I love that.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, history, political history, economic history, and writing history, they're completely intertwined with each other.
Yeah.
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 It's really interesting that connection between politics, economics, and writing. That's really interesting. I always thought that it would be a great PhD thesis for somebody to write, to research that and lay it out how the changes in society and the changes in the economy then led to a preference of a new breed and a new way of riding and
Yeah.
a new purpose for the horse, new job for the horse, so to speak.
Well, I'd
Yeah.
buy that book.
Yeah, you write it.
Well,
Nice.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and I had a lot
Yeah,
of fun.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks for the invitation.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.